What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely. Straight up, no chaser. I want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat right now. What's up, chat? How y'all doing today? And before I even get started at all, I want to give a shout out to my members. And, let me just say this, man. Memberships are special, man. You keep me going. The channel with support is able to continue, and I'm able to provide you with some real decent content. And I appreciate each and every one of the people who have subscribed to my channel. And before I even begin to do anything, I would like to give them a shout out. Okay. So, and this just, this is just par for the course. Okay. So I want to give a shout out to James Washington. I want to give a shout out to Hostile Adept, Seventh Coast Dojo, Ronan Martin, Shop Talk Live, W. Pierre One, Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, The Nameless Protagonist, Force Windu, Lady Miss Thing Green, BGS Ivmore, and Marvin Battle Jr. So those are my members, man. Much love to y'all. Thank you. And so if you want to become a member, you can always click the join icon on the channel, and it'll give you some insight on how to do that. But today, I'm joined with one of my frat brothers, one of the Qs, man, one of these bros, man, Blue Dog, Sand Dog, and we're a member of the mighty fraternity Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. You know what I'm saying? 1911, November 17th. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, that's sweet.
But so I brought you on this show because some of the conversations that we've had have given me some insight as to how you think about how to implement a plan for achieving success for Black folks. So just give me the rundown on your take on things. Like, what were your experiences as a young guy growing up? What brought you to the fraternity, and then what brought you to the military, and then what brought you, because people don't know right now you live in Dubai, okay?
Yeah.
And so just tell people a little bit about your story and some of the things you think, and how that can apply to achieving some kind of success and related to overcoming nature, the social environment, and how to initiate campaigns, strategy, and logistics.
Real Dog, one, thank you for bringing me onto the show. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your hospitality and willingness to reach out back to me so we can talk as well privately. I thank you for it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I started out, I'm from the East Coast, I'm from Brooklyn, and I grew up in the projects. So I grew up in Do or Die Bed-Stuy and Roosevelt housing projects, and later we lived in East New York. And so, as the slang that a lot of guys use in the manosphere, my dad was a retired Ray and Pookie, so to speak. So my pops came out of like the Nation of Islam, the 5% nation. And I remember my grandmother telling me, I said, because my grandmother was a Christian from Selma, Alabama. And I said, Grandma, how did you feel when Dad and then became Muslim, and my uncle? And then she goes, if Allah will keep them off the streets, I'm all for it, right?
That's
and
right.
So for me, I was very fortunate growing up in that environment, because the first books that my father ever gave me was Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, The Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, right? So I grew up reading that literature. I grew up with, the FOI manuals that they had. I grew up, reading everything from Ivan Van Sertima to John Henrik Clark. I've been studying people like I'm trying to think, Dr. Claude Anderson, for years, when I was growing up as a kid. And so what happened was that around junior high school or so, for me, where the hurt started was I started to slowly but surely lose my childhood friends to the street life. And I remember being upset for a long time, but What I didn't know was I didn't know that not everybody had the same home life that I had, right? And so I ended up, so going into high school and everything else like that, I ended up finding myself, being lonely or separated from my friends because, I had a structure started from my home, that kind of saved me from getting into that life. And what I would like to tell a lot of people is that what you call Ray Rays and Pookies, these people are not dumb. A lot of these guys are very intelligent, super talented, and highly educated, both in street life and book life, right? So I got a homie that's just getting out of prison after 22 years who taught me algebra when I couldn't understand it, right? So a lot of these guys that we like to dismiss or separate ourselves from are anything but dumb. And if you were to actually dig into it, you will find out that a lot of them come from circumstances you can't even fathom. So one of my homeboys at the age of 14, I grew up to find out that when he turned 14, his moms came to him and said, yo, you're the man of the house now. I'm struggling. I could barely keep a roof over our heads. And she said, whether it be legal or illegal, you're going to bring money into this house.
Wow. So wait a minute, right, man. So this guy is no older than how old you say? 14?
He's 14 at the time. Yeah.
And so his mother basically said, you're the man of the house now. I'm having trouble keeping a roof over your head. So it's your job to be able to provide income so that this roof can remain over our head, and all the material and other essentials are going to have to be provided by you. And I don't care how you do it.
Yes.
Oh man, that's a hell of a ordeal for a young man to have to endure. Because first of all, how does he know how to make sure at 14 that that's what his job is? But okay, go ahead, my brother. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah. No. But again, it's a discussion, right? And like I said, so for me, when we shared that story, my mind was blown because I have a greater point to it because, at a time of my life, I held what some people would call, quote and unquote, I guess what you would call pseudo conservative views, right? And so as I began to learn more about Black men, the state of Black men, especially when I got to, because everything I was learning before was mainly from a historical perspective. But when you get into philosophy and psychology, once I got hip to guys like Tom Curry and Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, especially with Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, I couldn't make it through his stuff, him or Tom Curry. So like I heard Dr. T. Hassan Johnson speak like on audio or something like that years ago, but I could give a better example, like when he came to YouTube and when he would talk about the state of Black men and what we were up against, like I never really understood it from an academic perspective. And when he first came to YouTube, I couldn't even get through his videos. So like it was so shocking, so paralyzing for me that I couldn't even make it through the video. So I would either have to fast forward and actually come back to it later, once I built up the stomach to actually listen to, the things that we go through as men. Like I said, because on some scale, like I said, I was sheltered from it because I had my dad, right? So, me and my dad, me and my father was tight. So, unlike a lot of other kids in the hood, my dad was the one that bought me my Atari, my Transformers, and everything else. So I had a completely different structure. So whatever I wanted to do as a young man, I had to go through my father. So my father was the final approval authority for everything in the house, right? And then, later on, I grow up, I go to college down south or for HBCU, and, getting into the point of our discussion, there are many different aspects to manhood, right? And so on the manosphere, I hear people talk about, getting women, getting money, stuff like this. But one of the main aspects of being a man is the ability to oppose and control your environment. So when I showed up to my HBCU, the housing at the time was under par, and it was a fairly small campus. So I walked to talk to the interim president and the head of physical facilities at the time. And I asked them, how was the school funded? And what could we as the students do in order to raise money, so that we could help repair the university? And so there's a male side and there's a female side. So after a bit of time, I became class president. And then I went back to the men and I laid out the plan to them, right, in order to improve our standard of living. But what happened was that, again, being young, a lot of guys, 17, 18, 19, they were more interested in being on the female side of the campus as opposed to actually improving their quality of life. Because we had some buildings, Gigi, where it was at the point where if you turned on a refrigerator or a microwave at the same time, you could blow the building up, right?
Oh,
and so for me, that was kind of like the beginning of some of my frustrations with us, as a group of men, because I was like, yo, how could a woman or fun mean more to you than your standard of living? And so I had another seminar with the men when I was in college, and some guys even now who visited me out here. And I told them, listen, if you take our university and you made it a country, right? I walked around this campus as a young man. I became class president. Then I joined ROTC. Then I decided to double major in finance and economics. So while you were having fun, I single-handedly took over this country. I controlled it politically. I now had law enforcement in the military, and I now controlled the banking. So if our university was a country and I was one of a malevolent mindset, right, then you would be complaining about me oppressing you when you were never involved in the process in the first place, right? Which is when you fast forward to it now, like when I hear a lot of cats, now, who now want to complain about racism or the current environment, from my perspective, the issue that you're having is that you're constantly reacting to everything, right? So if we were to have a manifesto, if we were to have a way of operating, right, or a way of unifying ourselves, you wouldn't be sitting here complaining about the things that you're going through now, because you would have been proactive in order to prevent these things, right? And so, so even then, when I was a university student, my idea was for us to build a community and build the infrastructure as such that, so that, we could manage perils from the outside if we had to deal with it. But for a lot of dudes at that particular time, the extent of their ambition was just merely women and fun. And if that's the extent of your ambition, that's fine. There's something for everybody. But in order for you to quote unquote enjoy life, right, you have to do some of the rough stuff where you can maintain that in your environment, where no one can come take it from you.
Okay.
Right.
I get exactly what you're saying. So already as a young guy, and look, maybe it's because you had, a father in the home. There was some structure, some order there. Maybe perhaps it's because your father taught you the value of not just merely being a hedonist, so to speak, not just somebody who's reveling in pleasure, but somebody who's looking to provide order wherever they go. And this ties into leadership, because, our fraternity is a fraternity that, for the most part, espouses the ideal of leadership. And Colonel Young being one of those exemplary men who provided leadership for ADOS people. You know what I'm saying? So,
yes.
But before I continue, I want to give a shout out to Vernon King and Extended Clips. Thank you, BGS, for chiming in and moderating here in this chat. Also, if you can, man, make sure to support the channel. I don't know if you can see it right now, but it's pretty small. But my Cash App is $G with a PhD. Please support the channel. So having said that, man, I want you to continue on, because you were saying that one of the main things that was on your mind as soon as you stepped on campus was to improve the infrastructure and to maintain or gain a control over the environment. Now, what was it about you know, that being a priority and not the pleasure and the women? Like what made you think that way at such a young age? Like why was it that you were predominantly orientated towards doing something more than just reveling in the pleasure in the women? What was your mode of thinking? Like what made you think that way?
Again, coming from Brooklyn, and then because BGS is out there, I listen to them. So I grew up a little bit in Downey, California, and I also spent some time in Riverside and Moreno Valley. And like I said, when you grow up in the hood, you kind of grow up fast, right? And so for those who are fortunate, you learn from the mistakes of others. So one of the reasons why I didn't run into college with penis in hand is because I had already seen women ruin a lot of dudes' lives, right? You know what I'm saying? From my teenage years to my early adulthood. So I didn't want to, so, most people, you're going to college, right, to be upwardly mobile. So I didn't want to end up back in my dad's house. So for me, I saw women as a stumbling block to my success, as opposed to like, going out there and having fun. Because later on, I would join ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, in order to become an Army officer. And then back then, if you had the monster, which is HIV, or if I got somebody pregnant, that could have all delayed, that could have delayed or completely prevented me from actually capitalizing on the future that I was planning for myself. Okay. Right. So at that particular time in my life, like I said, my goal really was to become general of the Army and then ultimately to become president of the United States. And even when I was in ROTC, that was one of the things that bothered me, because I would tell dudes, like, as you know, GG, I went on to become a tank platoon leader, a scout platoon leader, support platoon leader. Two of those positions happened in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And then I went on to become the headquarters troop executive officer. So when I was 21 years old, I was given 15 men and 4 tanks, right? Each tank is worth $5 million. So that's $20 million, right? Then after that, I was given a scout platoon as a first lieutenant. And those are the guys I took to war. So I took 42 men to war between the ages of 18 and 36 at the age of 24. And I owned 8 M3A3 Bradley fighting vehicles. And then as a support platoon leader, I managed the resupply along the Iran-Iraq border doing OIF. And then before we left Operation Iraqi Freedom, I was a headquarters Troop XO, and I was second in command of 228 men, which included the colonel and his staff, right? And so backtracking on that, a lot of my homeboys, we were ROTC, they would say, nah, man, Ruff, I'm not going to do that crazy stuff. I'm going to get me a nice air-conditioned job, an office job, and I'm going to be back there with the hoes, kicking it with the ladies, knocking them down like bowling balls. And I'm like, man, don't you want to grab life by the horns? Don't you want to run shit, right? Don't you want to be on top of the totem pole? But for a lot of dudes, that was the extent of their ambition, right? That was the extent of their ambition. That's just what they wanted. They wanted, for what you would call, for the most part, a hedonistic life, right? But not understanding that you're only really a threat to any system, and you can only ensure your preservation through the pursuit and obtaining of power, right? And so, for a lot of people, like I was telling you before, so for me, I'm on the Republican side of the house, but I don't toe the line of the Southern strategy aspect of it, because the Republicanism in its nature is liberal, right? And it goes into the meat of our conversation because it's liberal. And so for me, I became interested in the Republican Party from the standpoint of what it had to offer African Americans at the point of Reconstruction during that time, where we were gaining prosperity, getting upwardly mobile up into the North, pulled the troops out of the South. So the other rhetoric part of it, that's not what I'm really into. What I'm really into is it's the economic part of it, which is, again, the ending of slavery, or ultimately racism, and something that allows us as Black men to enjoy in economics what you call the factors of production. And in economics, the factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And the funny part, Gigi, is that if you go back in the old textbooks, if you took any microeconomics course, family used to be at the center of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you know what I'm saying? So family used to be at the center of it. And so again, the idea of creating family community, because I hear a lot of guys say, well, I want to have power, but I'm not interested in making a family. And that's actually an oxymoron. That doesn't make sense, because whatever you build up or whatever you generate using the factors of production, who will you pass it on to, and who will you keep it, and who will keep it going, right? And so the idea is like I said, for us as a group of men to get into the factors of production. And it's like I kind of told you last night, is that a lot of us, we need to be in all places of society, Gigi, meaning this, like some of us are Republican, some of us are Democrat, some of us are in the army, some of us are in the police. And it's just like I was telling you last night, the Ku Klux Klan was once known as the Invisible Empire, which means that they're sitting in the Democratic Party, they're sitting in the Republican Party, they're sitting in the police departments, and everywhere in between.
Right. So I mean,
right,
so the idea there is that you got an organization of men who are playing all sides of the fence, and while there's a seeming disconnection between what they're doing, in actuality, they're all working cohesively in order to try to make something happen in relation to a goal that they've already set for themselves, and they're just logistically and strategically covering all bases so that at any point in the institutions that exist within the framework of the society that they're working with, they're going to have some input and some influence.
Correct. So remember what I told you. So in the military, right, you fight 3-to-1 odds, meaning that if you're going to attack a tank platoon that has 4 tanks, right, you're going to fight that tank platoon with the tank company, right, which has 12 tanks, right? So that will allow you to envelop your enemy or surround your enemy. And it's just like I told you before, like with African Americans, the problem is that you now live in a very complex world with multiple solutions, and you're going to have to organize and use all of those solutions simultaneously to your benefit, right? So think about it like this in terms of current politics and how we talked about last night. If you looked at the Army is many different things. There's an armor corps, which I come from. There's a signal corps, which is communications. There's transportation, and the list goes on and on. And so what happens is from higher, you'll have this massive mission statement. And then that mission statement filters down to the different branches, right? And then from there, it filters down again to whatever level that it's going to be on. And so if I wanted to seize territory, the signal guys, the communication guys know their part. The infantry guys know their part. The armor guys know their part, so on and so forth. But the mistake that we make as African Americans is if we are an army, the signal guys will think that the signal piece is the complete solution. The armor guys will think that it's the complete solution. But technically speaking, you need all of these solutions to work in concert in order to achieve your objective, right? So what happens is, so if you look at the current political environment now, and what I would tell a lot of African Americans is that actually you're under threat to be, to actually look at either side of the American political fence as a complete solution, because what you are setting yourself up for, and I guess it would take much more study, but this is just my eyeball test, Gigi. What you are setting yourself up for is what W.E.B. Du Bois fought against, which is the Atlanta Compromise, right? Because if you go left, right, okay, you're the face of civil rights, but then all the goodies of civil rights may go out to other groups, and then all of the academia regarding civil rights belongs to other groups, right? And then if you go right, right? You got my homeboy Trump who's saying, I want to introduce a patriotic education, right? So I don't want something like the 1619 Project, put into our schools that would discuss slavery and the impacts of racism and the consequences, right? I want, kind of like what BGS is saying in terms of complete integration. So Trump will say, okay, well, I want a patriotic education. And then on the left for civil rights, which has been completely hijacked, you may be the face of it for selling purposes, but the actual goodies or the dividends that come out of it, you're not going to get it, right? And so at the end of the day, you'll still be at the mercy of the system, under the Atlanta Compromise, right? So again, so for the guys who just simply want to enjoy life and, have their women and everything else, is if you are an Atlanta Compromise type person, then, ultimately, right, halas, you're free to go, right? You're free to, you're free to enjoy that. And so for me, I would tell us that, what you need is like a lot of what you're having now. And the manosphere that's being put together, Gigi, what you guys don't see is that you're helping me and you're helping a lot of people because you're putting terminology to our problems, right? So if you cannot classify or academically communicate what's happening to a group of people or a group of men in our case, then what happens is that you'll have people running around in circles for generations, right? And a lot of the work has been done, right? But unfortunately, we don't study it, right? We don't study it. And, guys like you, BGS, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, you guys are actually creating terminology for the circumstances that we're being put through. And then that terminology ultimately needs to become doctrine. And then out of that doctrine needs to come standard operating procedures. And then from there, you would have to have tactics, techniques, and procedures, right, that are needed to confront the issues that we deal with.
Okay, so a question, I want to get back to that, okay? So the idea is to develop the terminology to be able to make sense of the phenomena or the situations, whether they be good or bad, that Black men or the community as a whole is suffering under, or ways in which they're thriving under a specific set of social conditions, right? So once you're able to identify problems or benefits, you can then throw tactics, policies, and procedures into into place to where you could either mitigate the problems or amplify the benefits or the booms, right? But I want to go back to this piece though, and this is, I think, in the manosphere, is very important to understand this. So a lot of times, our men get lost into a whirlwind of dealing with women, which throws them off task of being able to do what men, for the most part, I mean, from time immemorial, have been ordained to do, which is deal with the rigors of nature and to be able to have some sort of impact on their social environment. Now, what is it that you perceive, I mean, aside from, not using tactical and strategic policies and machinations in order to, exert your will. Well, talk to us about that female piece, because you said some things to me yesterday about at some point, you if you're a man and you want your DNA to exist and persist throughout the world, and you want to be able to turn over your legacy, you're going to have a family of some kind, right?
Yes.
But what about the quality of woman that you're going to need in order to be able to make that happen, upon the event that that's something that you actually want to engage in and make happen?
Okay, well, back to what I was telling you yesterday is that if you are a man, if you are about your purpose, right? So if you engage women, right? If you engage women on a level where you don't have your dick in your hand, right? What happens is that when you engage women in terms of self-actualization for yourself, in terms of, I know who I am, I know what I want out of life, and I'm going in that direction, right? And so what happens is, as a man or as a young man, if you know this early, it allows you to weed out a lot of things, right? So this is kind of what, protected me from my hormones, so to speak. And so when I was in university, a lot of people, a lot of women saw me as a person of authority, as opposed to like, the guys that they were, bumping and grinding with at the time, right? Because whenever you saw me, it was a thing of business. Like I said, class president, being an ROTC, etc. So whenever I spoke, for the most part, plus I didn't party a lot, right? So a lot of times when people saw me, it was either in academia or I was addressing the student body, right? And like you said, at that time in my life, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't physically active with women, and I wasn't necessarily determined to be physically active with them at that time of my life, Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just had an interruption. Go ahead, my brother.
Yeah. And I was, and again, I was cautious of them because, like I told you before, I was cautious of them because, at that time in my life, I saw that engagement as a potential roadblock. And I think, again, back to what I said, as a man, I think the first thing that you want to do is you want to determine what you want for yourself, right? You need to identify who you are first, right? And it's just like I told you, I went on a date with a young lady and she said, whenever I'm around you, I don't feel like I could just be myself. And, I can't relax when I'm around you. I feel like I have to talk a certain way or act a certain way. And I told her it's called standards, right? And you're just not used to it, right? So whatever you do with crowds or other people or whatever the case might be, that's not what happens here, right? And so for me, I was vetting them. So for these women, I was vetting them to see if they could fit in my life in other ways as opposed to immediate gratification. And what happens is that for a lot of women, if you force them to be bigger, or if you challenge them to be bigger than what they look like or what's between their legs, they can't do it. Right. And like I said, they can't do it. And when you are established as the man, you engage life differently. Right. So I was in a relationship and I'm sitting at home. I'm 23 years old, right? And I had my life partner at the time, and I'm watching Dragon Ball Z, having the time of my life, right? And she's looking at me with this crazy look on her face. And then I say, well, what's your problem? She says, nothing. And I said, what? Are you bothered that, I'm here watching Dragon Ball Z and your girlfriends are going to come over? And she's like, yes. And you're sitting here like a big child. And I said, hold that thought. And I told her, okay, that's fine. Whose last name do you have? She said, yours. Whose house do you live in? Yours. When you go onto that base for medical care or whatever the case might be, right? Who provides that for you? She said, you do. And I said, you have a dad, correct? She said, yes. I said, did he raise you? She said, no. Then I said, the next time you want to call a man a child, I recommend you call your father. Because simply by marrying you, over the course of these 3 years, I have done more for you than your father has done for you in your lifetime. Mm. Now, as for your girlfriend who's coming to this house, we have a beautiful lifestyle. Amazing. And you contribute to it. But I know how women think, right? They see me and they equate me with your lifestyle. So what you're going to do is before your friends get here that you want to impress, you're going to go to Walmart. I want you to get me half a gallon of milk and some Lucky Charms. And I'm going to sit here with your girlfriend and I'm going to tell her, well, I'm trying to be a good man to do this, to do that. And I said, her lips will be wrapped around my penis before you can check out. And I said, now get out of my face with that nonsense, right? So what happens is, as a young man without purpose, you can't have those types of discussions, right? It becomes, it becomes very difficult because, you're getting married for love. and happiness and all these things. And, you know, and for my partner at the time, that's what I told her. I said, you're like the sixth priority in my life. All the other stuff that comes before you, the 5 things that comes before you, those are the things that allow me to facilitate the lifestyle that we have. Right. So in my life, you are number 5 or number 6. And so for a lot of men out there, right, if you know, like I said, if that person is coming into your life, they're coming in there to add something. And at that time of my life, I wanted to be a politician. You know, like I told you, we had a frat brother that was a mayor in a neighboring town, and he was actually giving me mentorship on how to enter the political arena there before I changed course. You know, and so for a lot of women, you know, they say that, okay, I want to be involved with these types of men, but the other part of it, or the other piece that they're missing, is that that man comes with the reality in the world of his own. And that reality may not be your homegirls, your sorors, and Tyler Perry and Spades on a Friday night. Right. So, you know, it's like I told you before, when I worked for a shipping company, and they had their 150th celebration. And so you're there with Norwegian women, you know, Pakistani women, Indian women, you know, just partners. And you may all live in the same neighborhood with these people, right? And so at the end of the day, that is a completely different world. And so because I know that from my past experience, what I observed from many women is that a lot of them don't want to make quote unquote cultural shifts or code switch in order to participate in certain environments, right? They have no interest in it. So the thing is that, you know, for many women, you can't enter the lives of certain types of men on your terms. It's not possible. Those guys will let you go in a heartbeat.
Right. So, you know, this is the funny thing. So a lot of guys are experiencing women who feel like these women are the prize. Like, I mean, they say this over and over again, like, I'm the prize, I'm the prize. And it's like, if that's the kind of orientation that you have in relation to being in a relationship with a man, then you're going to destroy that man from the beginning. Because if you consider yourself to be to be a prize to that man, then you're going to whittle away all of the ambition away from that man. You're not going to help that man be able to accomplish anything great, because everything is going to be centered around you. And most of what you want to be centered around you is a bunch of nonsense and foolishness to begin with. Do you get what I'm saying? So
no, correct. So yeah, correct. Not to cut you off, but to say that point, because so from our community, like I talk to my female friends who are here, from our community, like if you see a guy marry somebody of a different ethnicity or background, I'm like, my question is, what are you upset about? Because your agenda with that man isn't community, it's lifestyle, it's outward presentation, right? So if that's your agenda, it really doesn't matter where he goes, because for many women, their dating decisions aren't community based.
It's personal. It's a personal come up for them. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not about, okay, I'm trying to develop a presence such that I'm going to have an impact and do something great. It's all about what can I get? What are the accoutrements that this man can give me to make me satisfied? But that's never satiated. I mean, like, that kind of woman will never be satisfied, because there's nothing you can do to satisfy her. And she has no aim or no purpose other than to extract resources from you without helping and aiding you to be able to have an impact over the environment and to create something positive and substantive for the entirety of the community, and beyond herself and beyond yourself. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I get it completely. Right. And this is, and that's what I'm trying to say, is that as a man, you have to have that agenda. And so again, you need an understanding of how the world works for yourself. So for example, like as a baseline, when I was a young man, when I hit junior high school, my dad looked me up and down and goes, you know what, son? You can't wear jeans or sneakers everywhere you go in life. It's time for me to teach you how to dress. Right. And then that's when the suits came out, the slacks, the houndstooth blazers, you know, and everything else. So I was fortunate enough to have that training. And then my dad will take me to the bank and say, okay, hey, son, this is the bank. That's the teller. That's the loan officer, right? And so I was prepared to actually go out and just simply manage the basics of life, where a lot of my homeboys weren't, right? So I remember being a young man in my 20s, teaching a lot of my other friends just how to manage the basics of life. They had no idea, right? Because they weren't taught these things. So for many of them, their sisters may know this stuff, but they didn't know. Right. And so, you know, and so that's what ended up happening. So at one time in my life, I was a C-level executive for a trucking company. I was in Afghanistan. So I had the ability to hire one of my homeboys that I grew up with at the time. And I believe at that time, you know, like I said, tax-free, because it was an assistant-based position. So I was paying him $8K a month. Okay. Right. So he made pretty much just about $100,000 a year, like tax free. And like I said, he worked with me. You know, I trained him. I taught him transportation, logistics, and, you know, all these things and everything else. And then he was able to take that and then go off. And like I said, and go off and do other things. And you know, going into strategy and logistics. Right. So on the basics, a logistician is anybody. A logistician is someone that has the ability to find solutions to complex problems, right? Whether this is transportation, distribution, supply chain, right? Which was ultimately my field post United States Army. So in the previous job, like I told you, for me, I'd done business development as far as Pakistan, all the way down to South Africa, you know, sitting here in the UAE. So dealing in trades, whether it's commodities, food, you know, et cetera. And what happens is that for us as a group of men, we all have a place, right? So whether you're the so-called street dude or whether you're the so-called billionaire, like I told you, just like the Army, there's a massive mission statement. And that mission statement needs to be broken up and condensed for all of us. And it's going to look different. Right. And it's like I told you the other night, I think that one of the things that a lot of dudes miss is that when you look at the formation of what would become global white supremacy, it didn't happen through mutual consensus. Right. So if you were on the island, or is it a peninsula or island, whatever England is, right, the Anglo-Saxons did not get votes from the Irish, the Scots, or the Welsh. Right. They reached out, they dragged them kicking and screaming, and it became the United Kingdom, which will ultimately have the world's first global empire. And so what happens is that with us, like I said, with us, you know, you might have to look at certain solutions the same way and understanding that you're not going to get everybody, right? So just like last night, I told you, in the world of business, you have something called change management. And in change management, there are people that will resist change. But as long as you have the tipping point of people that are ready for change, you could facilitate it. So nothing is impossible. And the issue is that a lot of us are operating only from certain vantage points. And from certain vantage points, you can't see what opportunities are available to you, right? So if you look at, like I told you the other day, when you had that conversation about Pan-Africanism, and I was telling you that whenever I get on a plane and I went to Ethiopia, Nigeria, or anywhere in between, aside from the locals, it was me and a bunch of Asians flying in and out of these countries, right? And so for a lot of us, for those who can't engage in that or have the resources to do it, as of right now, Africa is a blank canvas, right? And so they're looking for people to come in to help them play a part in their future, right? As opposed to saying, okay, you know, this is what we're offering, because they themselves are kind of just working their way out of colonialism, right? So right now in West Africa, like I told you, you have something called ECOWAS, right? And ECOWAS is like the Economic Union of African States, right? It's called the Economic Community of West African States. So they're starting to form their own kind of sort of like what you see with the EU. And there's even discussions on them having their own currency, right? And also the same thing in Horn of Africa and other parts of Africa. And so many of them are, so few of them are reaching out to African Americans to saying, hey, we want your insight, we want your support. And for those of us who are looking to get something for nothing, that's not the case. It is a blank canvas. And this is your opportunity to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Because there, you're not going to have, well, you'll have other challenges, but you're not going to have the same challenges as institutional racism that deny you life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is ultimately access to the factors of production.
Okay, so well, then there's several questions about that, because there are some people who say, well, because Africa is still mired in colonialism to some degree or another. I mean, you got the Chinese there, you still got European settlers that are there, and then you got like this kind of disjointed, kind of ambiguous conglomeration of states that were for the most part carved out artificially by Europeans, and right. So because they're disjointed, and because you still have the influence of colonialization there, what practically, what can you do in order to try to gain a headway in relation to the Pan-African ideal? That's a question.
No, okay, so I'll tell you this. So what you have to understand, and so for many African Americans, remember, you've been in America negotiating your plight now for 400 years. And for Africa, what you like, think history, right? History, a lot of history is painted to people as something that happened a long time ago, right? So now I have Nigerian family, West African family through marriage, yes? And so what happens is that you have, let's say, grandparents who grew up in colonialism, right? Then you'll have your parents who are Gen X who are raised by those people. And then now you have a completely different group of young people, right? Because a lot of Africa now is 25 and younger, right? And so you have different people. And so these people are now, especially through the internet, these people now are more integrated, more or less, into what you would call, quote and unquote, the Black culture, right? So they have a better understanding of how the world works as opposed to what their ancestors did, right? Who were at the cusp of mass communication, right? During the colonial era. And what I would tell a lot of people is that, in terms of coming over, the first thing that you would do is like, you have, there are things that you use to your advantage, right? So first of all, again, if you can visit and if you can come, right, you have in the States, many states have a Black Chamber of Commerce and an African Chamber of Commerce, right? So I'm just trying to reverse engineer it from the United States versus what I've been doing. So if you want to reverse engineer it from the United States, there's a Black Chamber of Commerce and there's an African Chamber of Commerce, right? And then this is where you would start to kind of get your information or get the lay of the land of what's available, right? Then, like I said, then from there, you have the embassy, right? This is why embassies exist. Embassies exist to serve macroeconomic purposes, right? To facilitate diplomatic relationships and trade, right? And then, so like I said, so between the African Chamber of Commerce or visiting the Ghanaian embassy or visiting the Nigerian embassy, right? Or friends or people that you may already know, this is the beginning for you to have the human relationships or the network or the connections that you would need to kind of get better information or a lay of the land, right? Before you yourself would have the chance to visit and see it for yourself.
Right. So, but another question I have is related to, because as you know, most Black men in America are having a difficult and a very tough time adjusting to the domination and oppression that they're experiencing right here from, the Pacific to the Atlantic, right? Between you know, between those water masses. And so, like, what is it that, for example, a black man from America, like, what could he even possibly gain from connecting his interest with that of Africa? I mean, I know you talked about it's a blank canvas, but many of us don't even have a paintbrush in order to paint on that canvas. So I, I'm just saying, like, logistically and strategically, what could an impoverished black man actually do in the context of doing anything substantive in relation to cashing in on opportunities on that side of the world?
Okay, now you have to remember, right? So to your point, there's the material aspect of things, and there's also the intellectual aspect of things, right? So there are a lot of people who are looking for consultation. Because remember what I said, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling just a little bit. I'm putting my thoughts together.
Okay.
Like I told you, logistics is the ability to solve complex problems, right? And so aside from, okay, I don't have money for investment, again, I can't do this. So for the impoverished black man, one of the first steps that I would advise you to do is when you make these connections, look for employment, right? So look for employment that will allow you to either bridge to the landmass or actually get you over there, right? Or that will actually get you over there. And so through that type of employment, which I could explain, so through that type of expat-like type of employment, one, you're making your money. So if you're an expat, one, you're making your money. The money is tax-free up until, I think, $108,000, right? Outside of what you may, owe a state or whatever the case might be. And then while you're there and while you're making that type of money, and then for some expat experiences like what I had before I moved into UAE, I wasn't paying rent because I was living on some type of site somewhere, right? And so at that point, right, you have the money, you have the ability to make connections, and then you can make moves from there. So like I said, so whether it's something in the States that's tied to or facilitates something in Africa or anywhere around the world, or finding the type of opportunities that will get you over there. And that's, again, that's anything from the military to construction to oil and gas to life support services.
Another thing, well, because there's some brothers who just don't see Pan-Africanism as an ideal that they want to carry out because they associate it with a kind of a strategic or an ideological aim that has been attempted to be, actualized before, but that, it hasn't really worked very well in the past. And so there's some people who want to stay here. What can brothers who are here do to improve their lot here and to ameliorate their condition right here in the United States? Like, what would your plan be for brothers who are here right now?
For brothers who are in the States, but again, when I talked about what I was doing in university, right? So for brothers who are in the States, this is the thing, is to actually align, right? And so for example, there are several forms, right? There are several forms of alignment. So for you and I, we have the benefit of our fraternal infrastructure, right? So we have the benefit for our fraternal infrastructure where we can align with each other and everything else. But for a lot of black men who are like outside of professional organizations and like I said, in all of these things, to be very honest with you, man, from my perspective, we would have to actually create new organizations or new institutions that are going to actually bring people together. So at a point in time, it could have been the church, it could have been the masjid, or or anything else from there. Because in the States, right, people are broken down into so many different groups, right? Democrat, Republican, union, non-union, and so. For me right now, Gigi, the best thing that I have to offer is that you would have to create something that's pretty much an open door to black men in general.
Yeah, let me just say this. just as you said, I don't want to, we can't reveal any secrets about our organization, but we do know that our organization kind of serves as an invisible hand, right?
Yes.
Bottom line, because you got bros who are in the organization that are Republicans, you got some that are Democrats, and they're in all walks of life, right? But there are common ideals and there are common rituals that we've undergone that tie us together. You get what I'm saying? And so I think that those kind of rituals are the kind of things that have been lost for the vast majority of Black men. They have no ties, no ritualistic ties that bind them together, right?
Correct.
And so, but for every society, there's always been rituals through which men have undergone that tie them together, that teach them certain things about, even if they don't agree on everything, they at least know that this they have in common. And it can serve as a springboard for them to, collaborate and to engage in joint ventures, whatever they may be. You get what I'm saying? So
yes.
but what are the impasses? What would you undertake to ensure that kind of thing could actually be successful here? Because I can see a lot of guys being, kind of hesitant and reticent about doing something like that. But one could argue without that institutional infrastructure, nothing will ever happen. Men will always be disconnected, disjointed, and they won't be connected in such a way that they can work on aims and try to accomplish missions and fulfill the objectives of campaigns in any kind of orchestrated way.
Yes, but that's the thing, right? So it, kind of like and I'm paraphrasing Frederick Douglass in terms of, right, it's easier to build stronger young men than to fix broken men. And like I said, and not to quote unquote disregard, broken men, but again, I remember, like I said, from our institutional level, where we had programs where we would mentor, right, and we still do have, right, where we would start at elementary schools and up to the high school level, right, where we would mentor young men, and they would, again, we would mentor young men, share our life stories, help them gain paths to success, academic support, all the things that, that we are, that we have within our institution that we have to offer the greater world. And what would have to happen, or maybe, Gigi, like I said, it's just me spitballing, but maybe you would think about something like from people from our order, getting together and creating something for the proletariat, right? Because there are many organizations that exist with their own individual efforts, right? And so what it may be time to do, it may be time to take these different efforts and put them into mass, right? Right. And so I'll tell you this. So what happened was in 1999, before we got kicked off the yard, right, me and my 4-dog had put together something called Black Business Week, right? I'm just giving it as an example. And what we wanted to do was, the slogan was reintroducing the community to itself. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to get with the Black Chamber of Commerce, and we were going to bring in all the Black businesses that we could to that campus, right, from the southeastern portion of the United States onto our campus. And, again, you would treat it like a second homecoming. It would be tied into the basketball season and everything else. And it wasn't something just for the campus, but for the greater community as a whole, where people could see Black entrepreneurship, understand what goods or services are provided, how to generate investment and all of these things. So again, it goes back to my people perish due to a lack of knowledge. So I think the idea is to kind of to move ourselves from individual organizational efforts and then putting together a mass effort. So like what you said, so for those young men who go through that program from, grade 1 to grade 10 or however long it lasts, those are that will be something in common that will bind them, right? That would give them, that unified ritual that would stick.
Right. One of the things that kind of disturbs me is, some of the, the elitism that's kind of displayed by members of Greek letter organizations, and and there's nothing wrong with men having high aspirations and seeking to obtain goals, but you know, we have to uplift the community. That's one of the cardinal principles of our organization, uplift. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's not just about you, being successful, because if you can't share the fruits of your labor with others, then what is the fruit of your labor's worth? So.
But remember, correct. But remember, Gigi, in our conversation, right? Because this is something that I forgot to bring up. Remember, I told you I went home in 2011, back to my old projects, and cried on the park bench with one of my tight men that I grew up with, right? Because this is how I learned about what Cats was going through, right? And I was like, yo, because that was my hurt. Like, why did y'all leave me? Because I would come when I was in high school, I would come home and I couldn't even go outside anymore, right? Because, at that point, my close homeboys are out there hustling, right? And so, and like I said, in my neighborhood, and it was funny because in my neighborhood, my pops had a rep. So dudes wouldn't even ask me to get into nonsense. So because I would ask my friends, yo, what y'all doing today? And they'd be like, come on. They'd be like, yo, you don't do that. Plus I don't want to have to deal with your pops.
Right.
Right. And so, you know what I'm saying? And so the thing is, when like I said, the thing is that, there's, a lot of us come from these types of circumstances. And so we have to find a way, like I said, we have to facilitate that way where you could have that universal, universalhood, amongst Black men in general, right? Because, like I told you, my mentor who I talked to, and I told you this the other day, and if I could, like for me, if I ever had the chance to cross Angry Man or whatever, I would like his perspective on this. But like I told you, my mentor, because I cursed my friend out on the park bench because everywhere I went in life, I was the only one. And I was like, yo, you were smarter than me. Again, from the dudes I grew up with, man, I'm the 6th round draft pick. Right. I'm not the, I'm not the creme de la creme in terms of talent, charisma, smarts, education. I'm not the creme de la creme of the dudes that I grew up with, right? And what happens is that a lot of educated dudes, quiet as kept, like I told so angry is because most of the dudes that go to college are beta males. He said, your friends are still out in the streets or wherever they are in life, right? Or God forbid, maybe even dead, right? And so a lot of the dudes that I was on campus with, they were emulating what guys did from Brooklyn, Chicago, or other parts of the world. So you'll have some dude from some small town, from a southern state with the street swag. And I've been in and out of the South all my life. My family is from the South. And dudes like that in the South didn't look this way in the 80s.
Right.
Right? It was a completely different culture, right? And so a lot of people started to adopt these cultures along with mass media, one, and then secondly, because you got to remember, a lot of us from bigger cities, right? When the 94 crime bill hit, where did we all go?
Right. Prison.
Well, not just prison, but a lot of our thugs, they bounced and they went to Atlanta.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if you didn't get locked up or killed as a result of the 94 crime bill, you reposition yourself in Atlanta. And from what I saw, that drastically that drastically changed the culture. And like I told you, I was talking to one of my homegirls that I went to school with. Truth be told, I wanted to date her. And I remember she's like, well, you're such a nice guy. And I was like, and I know what she was saying by me being a nice guy, by the way that she said it. And I said, you're from the suburbs of Alabama. What do you know about street life? I said, I will take you back to the projects of Brooklyn. I said, you watch that stuff on BET and it's cute for you and you have fun and you could turn your TV off and go back to your daddy's house. But it's not cute when you have to take your little brothers, because remember, I lived on the first floor of my projects. So it's not cute when you got to snatch your little brother out of his high chair because dudes are shooting the block up, right? It's not cute when you got to smell, when you smelling burnt plastic in the hallway, which is really crack, right? That's not cute. You know what I'm saying? It's not cute when you helping the old lady, carry her groceries on the elevator and you standing in a puddle of water that ain't a puddle of water.
Right. Yeah. Right? So a lot of times people glamorize, the thug life, not knowing that, these conditions are kind of imposed on a group of people. Like take, for example, that 14-year-old boy. So that guy, I mean, he had no choice but to figure it out within the context of a jungle. You get what I'm saying? I mean, and so a lot of times what we do is we sit there and we stereotype and we stigmatize these guys without knowing that there's a narrative, a set of circumstances, an entire context and social environment that these guys are thrust into. And, and sometimes you have to be mindful of that before you just begin to, utter obscenities about these guys and to label and stigmatize them in a deprecating way. But what we have is we have a guest here. So I'm going to open up the lines for a little bit because there's a brother who's in agreement with a lot of what you say. And I think he's glad to have you on the show today. So I'm going to chime him in and have him put in some input and ask you a few questions. Okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. What's good, my brother? How you doing, man? I don't know how to pronounce everything, but I'm just going to call you leader of ADOS, African Black Solutions. What's good, my brother? How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Mr. Research is fine. Mr. Research is fine. So I am very pleased you have this gentleman here. This is what it's supposed to be about. I do have a question for him, but this international thinking is the way we dominate everybody else. So 8 years ago, I had said, we in the manosphere, it was 4 of us, Alpha Male Wisdom, Angry Man, Minister Jap, and O'Shea. And the idea for Black Manosphere was supposed to be brothers working together, doing exactly what Sandog is talking about, taking over industries, being a conglomerate, changing laws and policies. And after all these years, it's devolved into dating and women. So my question to Sandog, and I know it's kind of a hard one, but when I did the whole Alpha Male Wisdom thing back in the day, I was saying the same stuff. Hey, look, you guys got to understand the enemy don't think like this. But I want to go back to the Pan-African thing, Sandog. How can I bond? When I look at how the Liberians killed African Americans who helped them, how can I bond with Africans when I'm thinking beyond money, I'm trying to think legacy, and some of these guys are not even realizing that the enemy looks at them the same identical way as they look at dude in Grenada or me. How can I get them to realize it got to be Black first?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I heard him. And here's the thing, because it's funny that you say that, because, when I sat down with my West African relatives, right, and they had certain questions for me, again, about the United States, because you have to remember is that we are all victims of the same colonial type of education, right? So, and I'll give you an answer. When I was in school in Cali, right, when I was in Downey, we had a film on slavery. And after the film on slavery, they showed what Nigeria was like at that time in the late 80s. And I think it might have even been fresh off a military coup. And one of my white friends at the time came to me and said, William, I don't think slavery was cool. like I completely disagree with it. But then he pointed at the TV screen at Nigeria and said, look at that place, William. Just look at it. It's a mess. Right? It's a mess. Can you at least admit that you're better off over here than you would have been if you stayed over there? And the issue is, and I say that to say this, is that between all of us, right, whether you're from the continent, the Caribbean, or the continental United States, all of us have been given negative connotations about each other for a reason. Because that same video that I watched on slavery, it opened up with the line that when Africans first came to America as slaves, they came with little to no culture. Outside of labor, their contributions to American society was very little, with the exception of some contributions to music and other forms of art. So, you know what I'm saying? So, so you're looking at in terms of how we are educated, like I said, how we're taught and how we're educated about each other. And in terms of, so for me, in terms of building that bridge, what happened in my small experience is, like I said, through Pan-Africanism, I knew a lot about their culture and in terms of what happened to them. And I was able to help them see or connect the dots, or for lack of a better term, show them the intersectionalities between their plight and ours. So, and I know it sounds like something that's very complicated. It's not an easy solution, but that's what it was. It was in terms of education, which is why Gigi and I was talking about, having infrastructure, right? Because the issue is because I was talking to one of my Arab friends, and what happens is a lot of people are coming here in order to come up, right? They're coming to the States in order to come up. So what happens is they're looking to get with the people that's the plug for them. So whether that's white people or anything else in between, that's who they're looking to get into. And that's why it's important for us to control our environment, right? Because what happens is that without control of the environment, a lot of people are going to look through you and look past you. So your same Liberian friend who's come to the States, right? He has no idea that you desegregated these schools for him. He has no idea that you desegregated corporate America for him. They don't have, they don't, I think that the mistake that we make as African Americans is that we believe that because they have their lands, their names, and their culture, that they're knowledgeable of history. These people are not knowledgeable. These people are not knowledgeable of history. They are living right here and right now. And if I could say anything to you, sir, is that one would be to educate them, but then secondly, we need the infrastructure to be able to do that, right? We need the infrastructure to be able to do that and some level of control over our environment, because the mistake that African Americans make is that we believe loyalty is free, and loyalty is not free. You have to have the ability to be able to reward and punish in order for people to be loyal, right? So somebody is not gonna, somebody is not gonna come from India per se, come into the American Indo-Pac community and badmouth what that community is doing. They're gonna have to come in and they're gonna have to toe the company line, and if not, they're out.
Right. But here's the unique thing about colonialism, right? No matter where it occurs and where it happens, the first thing they do is they cut you off from your history. That's the first thing that they do, because if you're not knowledgeable historically, then you don't have any political orientation whatsoever. They provide the context in which your lives are played out within their system. And that's the whole point of the education. I mean, in the United States, I mean, they took scores and thousands upon thousands of Native Americans and subjected them to a European colonial education. And the goal was to erase the people from their culture so that they could operate as a cog in a wheel to provide labor and resources for the current system, right? And so if you're going to in any shape, form, or fashion, and I say it starts with education. It might not appear to pay any immediate dividends, but if you got a group of people who don't even know their own history, they have no axiology, meaning a value system, where they're trying to create a system whereby they can, uplift themselves from the political situation that they've been thrust in. There's no game. You're not even playing the game. It's like, as I said, it's like going on a basketball court. You got 5 guys and they don't even know what the game is. And then you got another team of guys who might not be as athletically astute, but they're still going to be able to beat you because they know what the game is and they know how to play the game. And they're working as a team together to play that game in order to beat you. Right?
Yes.
So
because the bigotry, here's the thing, and I will tell the guys who are listening in, what you need to understand is that the bigotry that you see from some other groups of people is ignorance. And that's completely different with the level of conscious violence that you've seen in the period of 400 years. These are completely, like I said, these are completely different things, right? And so, like, again, Connor, Gigi, what I told you last night, and I want to say this to the audience. I went to a dinner, and I had my friends from Asia who were with me. One guy was Japanese, and exactly this is how it happened. One guy was Japanese, one guy was Chinese, a few guys from the Indo-Pac subcontinent, and a few guys from Arabia. And we're talking, and the Japanese guy goes, well, Sandor, we are not accustomed, for a time, those of us from Far East Asia weren't accustomed to Black people. Plus, there's the negative stereotypes on television and from what we've seen ourselves in our countries. And then I went one by one, and I asked the Japanese guy, fine, I'm scary, right? Maybe somebody like me took your wallet, but in your history, you had interaction with Yasuke, who came from Mozambique as a slave, then became the best samurai in your history and lived in your land with honor. But the people you idolized dropped 2 nuclear bombs on you. Then I went to the Chinese guy and I said, hey, so it was me and the Tribe Called Quest that took all that opium out of Afghanistan, sailed up the Yangtze River, and forced you into trade. We did that. Then I pointed at my Arab friends. It was me and DMX that signed the Psycho-Pico agreement that broke up Arabia post-Ottoman Empire and facilitated the apartheid there. We did that. Then I pointed at my friend from the Indo-Pac subcontinent. So it was me and Jay-Z who owned the Nigerian East India Company that starved 45 million of your people to death, exploited your religious and ethnic differences, and split you into several countries. We did it. And when I went, after I was done going to them one by one, the silence at the table was deafening, because what you see in the States is, so what you see in the States is that, oh man, these people have cohesion and they're tight and they're this. And I'm telling you guys, I lived in Afghanistan. I lived in Pakistan. I lived in Somalia, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, etc. So all of these groups that you see in the States and you think they got it together, that is not what it's like in their own country. So when they come to the States, either a lot of them come with money already, or for those who don't, when you come to the States, right? Because remember, problems are from your perspective. So if I'm coming from mainland Nigeria and you put me in the projects of Brooklyn, you solved 90% of my problems, right? You know what I'm saying? From what I was dealing with before. And so what African Americans, what we have to understand is that you cannot assume that because these people have their names and they speak a language that they are hip to what's going on. Because a lot of them don't, like I said, a lot of them don't have a clue. I'm over here teaching cats their history, right? How do I know more about your history than you do? And so the thing about it is that, so to include the fact that what a lot of you don't know is that a lot of us are also role models, right? Because African Americans are the only people in mass who have challenged white supremacy. So you are also a role model to many people globally, you know what I'm saying, in and out of the continent in terms of challenging the system. So the same way African American women have the natural hair movement, guess what? Women in India have adopted a movement inspired by it called Unfair and Lovely, right? Because through colonialism, right, you know, that whole desire to be lighter skinned, there's a product called Fair and Lovely, and it's a skin bleach, right? And so they have Unfair and Lovely, right? And so the thing is that what we have to realize is that a lot of the people that you're dealing with, they're not operating on these super high enlightened levels, right? They are going wherever they can to survive and trying to eke out whatever type of living that they can get. And so, you know, back to my original point. So at the end of the day, loyalty is not free. So if we had an infrastructure, if we were cohesive, whenever somebody comes over here with a certain amount of melanin, they will be put in a position to know and understand that whatever opportunities you have here, right, starts here. And it's a result of here. So going to an HBCU, I've seen tons of Kenyans and Nigerians or whatever get scholarships to go to these schools, right? And so, like I said, so at the end of the day, you know, the understanding is that when you get here, you're coming under this umbrella. Because if you go back to what we were saying, remember, and I know that people in the manosphere feel a certain way about the term Black, but in psychology, there's something called sublimation. And sublimation is when you take something that's a negative and you make it a positive. So when people came to America, whether they were Dutch, Spanish, British, or anything in between, they said that we are white. So from my perspective, the terminology Black gives you the ability to align yourself with hundreds of cultures, if not more, that you would never have been aligned with before. Because remember, you have a common experience, right, with a common group of people, right? And so using that terminology allows you to align, right? So I know a lot of people will say that it's a negative connotation, right? But so what happens is if I'm Yoruba and I'm growing up in Nigeria, right? And so mostly everybody there is Black. So I'm Yoruba, Igbo, split into whatever different groups you are. But the instant I leave Nigeria and I go to the UK, right? Instantly I'm Black, right? Because the whole Yoruba thing no longer applies, right? So as what we call like a nigga wake up call, right? So what happens is that you have more and more people coming out of the continent that are experiencing the larger world. They understand the larger world. And so that terminology, Black, again, if you're thinking about it, you know, using the process of sublimation, it will give you the ability to align yourself with people in Africa, India, Polynesia, you know, et cetera, you know, for a common goal. So it's not, I don't think that I would strategically throw that baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, you know, because you know, the natural impulse is to say, okay, well, these people know exactly what they're doing. They're coming here and they're taking advantage of the opportunities. They're not respecting us. They have all of these pejorative things to say about us. They don't care about us. They treat us dismissively and so on and so forth. And you know, there's a lot of that going back and forth in between different, you know, ethnic groups of people who are considered to be Black. But what I always like to do is to let people know that white supremacy is global. It's not something that's local. It's everywhere. And you can try to, you know, handle it where you are. But the reality is that white people are imposing it everywhere they can. Any and everywhere they are organized. and they have infrastructure. They have campaigns and plans on how to keep us separated, to keep us divided, to keep hacking away at each other, as opposed to finding a means by which to see what we do have in common and finding a way to resist against it. So the idea is there, but the practical implementation, though, is what people are having a problem with.
Or at least, or what happens is when they do fight amongst each other, what they'll do is they'll fight amongst each other, but when William and Gigi show up, they're smart enough to make a united front, right? And say, okay, let's push him off the board. Let's push him off the board. Then we can go back to whatever our internal bickering is.
And that's right? Essentially what the scramble for Africa was. It essentially was what the scramble for the Americas was. I mean, let's not forget, the French, the British, the Portuguese, and Belgium were all in a fight over this territory here. And they did everything that they could to hurt, to harm, to kill, in order to gain that territory for themselves and for their mother states.
Let me just say this, though. Let me just say this. I'm going to break down. See, Sandog is saying the same thing I say. When I'm in these circles, I say a lot of stuff people don't understand. But to Sandog's credit, I've lived in some of these places. I've lived Romania, France, England, the grill. I can tell you about Wessex. I can tell you about the Celts because I studied it. And to his credit, at his dinner party, I would do the same thing. I would ask dudes from Cameroon, why are you allowing Arabs to talk Islam to you on one side and then push you out of your country on the other? And then you come here to America and talk greasy to us, and so on and so forth. I think what Sandog is saying that's similar to what I say all the time. It's not a they situation. It's not enough of us. It's not enough of us who are well versed at the dinner table to be able to throw their history back in their faces. That's where the real issue is. It's not enough of us who have manager mindsets and know about margins and income sheets. That's where the real problem is. They are coming to the country with family money. They are coming to the country using civil rights laws, which is also what Sandog said earlier, to get what they've got. They look like they got it all, but really not. They're using their grandfather's money. And they're coming in on the back of our civil rights laws, which is why the Democrats call everybody black now. So I'm gonna step down, but I applaud what Sandog is doing. I just joined the equality, diversity and equality impact task force at my hospital. I got $1 billion hospital. I'm the only brother here. Everybody else is African or Chinese or something of the sort. I'm trying to get more brothers in. So I gotta step forward and risk my job to help somebody's son. And that's where we really got to start doing it. We got to start making these power moves rather than just falling in love with talking in these circles. That's all I want to say. So shout out to Sandog and you, Gigi, for having them on. Peace.
Oh, thank you, sir, man. Thank you for coming in and contributing, man. I want to give a shout out to T Fitness for you. I want to give a shout out to my brother who came in, leader of ADOS, African Black Solutions. And I want to give Black Uhuru Strikes a shout out. And I'm going to leave the link one more time just in case anybody else wants to chime in because we're going to begin to wrap it up. I know my man is in another hemisphere. And so, I don't know what your schedule is over there. I don't know what time of day or night it is, but, I just do want to thank you, Dog Team, for coming here and spitting some knowledge because I think it's necessary. But if anybody has any questions about anything that Sandog has said, please feel free to come in and ask a question if you got any disagreements. But I think more than anything else, what's important about what you've said thus far is the following. That, quite naturally, men, they need to step in and control their environment. And the only way to do that is to get rid of the distractions and to actually get your hands dirty and to do it. and nobody's going to reward you for doing exactly what it is that men normally do when they're encountered with a problem. I remember you saying something about, especially men who are of African descent, I mean, they were faced with some of the most rigorous environmental conditions on the planet, and they were able to handle it. They were able to bring down magnificent beasts through cooperation and collaboration, and they managed it. Okay, they managed to make their problems tractable. They managed to deal with and to harness the power of fire. I mean, they did so many marvelous and stupendous things, and then now we sit stupefied, wondering why we can't get a handle on our situation. And maybe it's because not because we don't have the capacity to do so, but maybe perhaps it's because we have the wrong focus. We're worried about things that are going to pay immediate dividends without understanding that there's value that accrues from being able to enhance and control the environments in which you live. And maybe we're not paying attention to what is necessary to actually do that, as opposed to, going for the quick fix,
Yeah, because again, right, they say, blessed is the man, right, who will plant trees under whose shade he will not sit, right? And so the thing about it is that this is not a quick fix. It's not, like I said, it's not an immediate it's not immediate solution. Just in terms of everything that we said. I mean, if you look at it, like if you look at the man out of Africa, right, with the Bantu migration, or us being the first Homo sapiens to walk out of Africa, right? Again, lions are moving around at night. A lot of wild cats are nocturnal, right? But you mastered fire. So if you could somehow oppose. Because remember, not anybody could just walk up into Africa, right? Africa was very dangerous. You walk in there, oh, a pink frog, let me touch it. You touch it, and it's at your own peril, right? So to master that environment and to walk out of Africa and then actually become all of the rest of mankind, I don't think that what exists now is as perilous or dangerous as nature itself. Right. And so, and like I said, so the idea and what happens is that the idea to subdue an environment or the concept of subduing an environment to your will is not it's not a thing where you're going to get immediate personal comfort from it. It's going to suck. Right. Again, a lot of it sucks. So as a soldier, I spent nights in the rain. Right. When I was in Iraq, I lived in a trash dump with my Bradleys because that was the most tactical place that I could be. And then in all the other places I lived in complete abject poverty. Right. Because for the nature of what I was doing, I would be out in the environment. And what I would tell a lot of men is that, especially, for younger guys, no matter define yourself. Understand who you are and what you want out of life, because it's crazy. Like I would hear like BGS and those guys talk about it. And like they said, like you'll ask a lot of men, well, what do you want? And they can't give an answer. Right. And they can't give an answer. So the idea is, because one of the things that my father did for me was that he preached male chastity for me from an early age. My dad told me that my penis and sperm was valuable, right? And that it shouldn't be all over the place. And so as a result of that, it put me in a position to engage women completely different, right? And so as a man, if you are focused and you are on your purpose, as they say, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you. Like, again, you seek your purpose, you seek that. And then what happens is what you will end up finding out about yourself is that you become a lot more selective about the types of people that you bring in, that you want to bring into your life. Right. So now it becomes more than she's pretty, she has a big ass, or, or this. It becomes completely different. Does she fit? Does she fit? Does she fit into the program that I have set for myself? Does she fit into the direction that I want to go in? And like I said, and you'll find it'll be a lot easier. It will be a lot easier to differentiate where people will fit in your life for both men and women.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good lesson to learn, because, a lot, in philosophy, man, there's the idea that you can live the life of an epicure, or, you know, like a hedonistic life, okay? And the hedonistic life is no different than that of a pig. Anybody, I mean, you know, a pig can engage in activities that allow him to experience pleasure with his body. I mean, you know, like a pig can eat, a pig can have sex, and a lot of it, okay? And a pig can roll around in the mud and experience pleasure from bodily sensations, right? But that's not akin to what a man is going to find pleasure in. I mean, not to say that a man can't experience pleasure with his body, but of course, you know, that's not the single aspect of men. Men are able to do much loftier things, okay? And then another area or aspect of life that men can cling to is that of an ethos, or you know, they can explore the parameters of an ethical life, meaning they can come into a world and espouse ideologies that the environment imposes on them. Like, I mean, or, you know, like, say, for example, we live in America, we can come to adopt and embrace American culture in all its facets and do nothing to change the ethos. Okay, we can just say, okay, this is the kind of life that this culture, this society presents to me as being a valuable kind of life. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to offer no pushback. It's something that's acceptable to me. And, you know, in order for me to be successful within the context of the culture in which I live, I'm just going to latch on to what's being told to me is the right kind of life. And I'll do that. And then I'll gain the esteem of my peers. Or you can take the leap further, and you can go the road less traveled and take a leap of faith and carve out the kind of life that, you know, the purpose that God gives you, or that, you know, the universe gives you just by being a unique individual that you are. I mean, then at that point, you're becoming a creator. You're becoming.
But Gigi, but there are greater powers than the pleasure of women. So, for example, there are greater pleasures, than the pleasure of women. So the pleasure of accomplishment, right? Of building something, like, okay, like I've built that company, or I raised this person to become a president, right? Or just like, even for me in my simple hobbies, right? I enjoy Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? You know what I'm saying? I enjoy sports. And so for me, it was just the roar of the Coliseum, right? So here every year they have this annual thing before COVID where people will come out for BJJ and compete at all weight classes and belts and everything else, right? And just the, like I said, just the roar of the crowd, right? The what you get, you know, what you get out of conquest. Like, if I could tell a lot of men, like, there was nothing like it. You know, when I was a 21-year-old man and I climbed in my tank, right? And I got in that tank and I squeezed the headphones. It's boop, all white element. This is white one, responder sequence over. Short count. So for tanks, a short count is before you start, right? Short count as follows: and 5, 4. And to hear those tanks just roar, like what did Conan O'Brien, not Conan O'Brien, but Conan the Barbarian say, right? The best things in life, right, is to destroy your enemy and to hear the lamentations of their women, right? And so what I would want for us as a group of men, to your very point, is to go beyond, you know, pure hedonism to actually ambition.
Right. And you know, that's a component of you know, our fraternal thinking anyway, man, you know, and I don't want to reveal, you know, the terminology, but I mean, you know, it's all about aspirations, bro. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
So, you know, if your only aspirations are to fit in, to skate by, you know, to follow and travel lanes that other people have already cut, then you're not being that bridge builder that you could be, you know, and we just have to do a better job of having higher ambitions, man. And, you know, I mean, it just is what it is. And some of the stuff that needs to be done doesn't even have to be done in the context of being anti anything. It just has to be pro us, developing a mission and actually developing a campaign and allocating duties and doing it. But that's the hardest step, man. It's a hard step, bro.
Correct. But what I'm telling you is that it's happening now. And like I said, you know, even for me, like when you look at you, BGS, Angry Man, Grinch, T.L. Son Johnson, Curry, and even Kendra, you guys are creating terminology and doctrine. This is what I'm trying to say. So even for us soldiers, you have doctrine, you have terminology. And like I said, so even then, one of the reasons why we're spinning around the way that we're spinning around in our community is because people understand that there's a problem. People understand that there's a problem, but there's a lot of disarray on how to deal with it, right? Because for some people, certain phenomena and traumas, it hits them different. But then once you're able to identify said phenomena and trauma, then you could kind of get a unified idea or stance on how to deal with it, right? And so it's like what I told you, a lot of what you guys have is actually the doctrine in the way, because like because for me, you know, women is one thing. I'm not saying that I don't like women, that's a lie, but it's one thing. But what I'm saying is that when I started out in this thing, I started out with BGS and culture, right? So if you're looking at it as a book, everything that BGS put out about culture or the Moynihan report, that is your prologue, right? That's your prologue. And then you have everything from relationships to the book that Grinch wrote, to the Octane series, to what you guys have going on now with the black male archetypes. And then you funnel all of that through all sectors of life. Again, because remember what I told you, the Ku Klux Klan calls itself the Invisible Empire, right? And so again, so for us, it would have to be something similar, right? So one of the things that we would have to do in our battle is to read the fine print. Because I asked my mother, and I said, Mom, after the civil rights movement, did you guys read the fine print? And she's like, what do you mean? I said, did the NAACP crank out a bunch of lawyers to read all the laws on the books of all states or territories of this union, to include the federal government itself, to ensure that laws created from slavery, the Black codes, or Jim Crow were completely abolished? But I said, did we ever read the fine print? And so this is what I'm saying. So even then, so for example, like what Angry Man said, and what a lot of people don't get is like what you call the guys you call Ray Ray and Pookie, technically speaking, right? If America was really fair, because a lot of criminals of old are wealthy now, right? So they say that the Kennedys were bootleggers or whatever the case might be. So crime, crime in and of itself is the part of the American ladder to success.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it is a part of it. And then for us as men, like, so think about it, right? But before we became the bros, well, a lot of us are educated Ray Rays and Pookies.
Yeah, that's why I always have a certain kind of defense for guys that are being disparaged by other brothers in the space, because I don't think that there's any specific type of guy who can be nominated, or a demographic who can be classified as being a thug, because it can happen from anywhere. I mean, anybody from any demographic, from any economic class, depending upon his life experiences or what he risks during his formative years, can be classified by that label, But I mean, people can overcome that. And like you said before, they can sublimate that. And that's what we want to do, to help them sublimate that kind of energy into something positive. You get what I'm saying?
But those guys are actually your business. But that's what I'm trying to say. So these street dudes are all their charisma and everything else that you want to call them. These guys are actually your business class. So the same way a lot of the samurai went from what to either becoming the Yakuza or the business class of the Japanese environment. Right. And so you're seeing it somewhat a little bit with guys like Jay-Z and Nas, et cetera. And so what happens is it goes back to what we're saying. a lot of these things are formulating, GG. It's just that we simply just have to take the action on it. So like guys that I just mentioned previously, you know, you included, that is the academic portion of it, right? And then there are resources that others like us have where you can look at something, where you can get with other Black organizations and then map out something that that our larger mass proletariat could fit into in terms of young men, like in terms of a program or, you know, whatever the case might be, right? And so you will have that aspect of it, right? And so it's kind of like, it's just like what like I said, when you get in the culture, or what BGS mentioned with the Prussian school system, right? And again, a lot of this will take a lot of effort, work, money. It's not something that can happen overnight. There's not some type of magical solution. But I think what happens is that if you were to take young men and show them how the world works and give them and put them in a position to tell them that these feelings, these emotions, and these thoughts that you have, there's nothing wrong with you're not a bad person because you can't sit still in class, right? Or or you're not a bad person because you're talkative, right? Or you're not a bad person because you're not getting the information this way. You're somebody that needs to actually go out there and do it,
right?
So, like I said, so at the end of the day, it's to your point, it's facilitating our own philosophy, our own thoughts. Just like what you said the other night about how a lot of us in the military will read certain philosophies, right? So when I went to war, I knew the complete history of the people who I was going to fight.
Right, and it was
minus their
it was required. It was required of you. You had to know the enemy.
Yeah. So for example, me sitting on my M3A3 Bradley. So what happens is you have conventional war and you have asymmetrical war. So for the conventional part of war, okay, I know that these people live in a tribal society. Their culture does like this. So, okay, with that understanding, what I'm going to do is because the vehicle that has the most antennas on it, right, probably belongs to the leaders, right? Because the leaders are the one who communicates. So what I'll do is I'm going to knock out the vehicle with the most antennas and rest assured the other guys will surrender. And guess what? That's exactly what happened.
Right.
Right. So like I said, so I knew them from top to bottom. And then just kind of jump into another point. What we have to understand as a group of men is that within military doctrine, there's a difference between destroy and defeat. So I can blow up stuff all day long. I can shoot up property. I can do this. Because something is destroyed does not mean that it's defeated. Your enemy is not defeated until they either lose the will or the resources to fight.
Right. And that's the only thing that I wanted, to underscore. And I'm gonna let you do some closing remarks. To me, I want men to have the will to fight. Black men, because I think we're nobody's coming to save us. We're all we got, and that's why I do identify with SYSBM. And I'm Ibmore. It's like, okay, well, we got to save ourselves. How do we do it? We have to exert control over our environment, man. Bottom line, we have to. And we have to find a way to come together despite our differences. It's not as if other men haven't done it before. Men do it all the time. But we have to develop the infrastructure and the institutions in order to facilitate that goal. So I'm going to let you lay out some closing remarks, and then we're going to cap off this broadcast. And so go ahead, my brother, Sandog. Go ahead and hit him up.
So my closing remarks are this, is that despite your walk in life and all of this nonsense of good Black men and bad Black men, educated guys, Ray and Pookie, we all have a part to play, right? And so what happens is that the guys that you call Ray and Pookie and everything else, technically speaking, in our community, once it's organized, those men are the enforcement arm of the community, right? So those types of men, because think about it, these same guys organized and formed hip hop groups. They organized and formed gangs, and they organized for the most part and created the culture that quote and unquote makes Black people cool, right? To whatever extent that is. And so at the end of the day, we all have a role to play. Like I said, here there's a lot of discussion, but I do believe that from these discussions, you will have a lot of us that will mobilize to help kind of put together our institution, our invisible empire, so to speak, right? That will allow us to enter all levels of society. And what you can't do is that you cannot allow your manhood to be determined by outside forces, whether it's other communities or even women, right? Because, a woman won't have the experience in life that a man has, right? And so all I'm saying is that across the board, in the process of sublimation, right? Again, we are all Black. We all have our part to play, right? And I'm ready to play my part. So if you and BGS came out tomorrow and said, hey, William, we need you to wash dishes and sweep the floor, that's exactly what it is. If that's what my skill set has to offer, then I will do exactly that, right? I will not aspire to be anything else. I'm not going to ask to sit, with the businessmen and the presidents, right? Because my skill set is to wash the dishes and sweep the floor, and I'll be glad in doing it, right? So we all have a part to play, no matter how big or how little.
Right. So at any rate, man, thank you so much, my brother, for joining the show. Thanks for all the people in the chat. Look, while the show is going on, I don't have time to really look in and to zoom in and see what everybody is saying. All I see is color, and I try to respond to the color. But I mean, at the end of the day, man, we try in any way we can to provide service. I know I do. And I'm not in a position to do a whole hell of a lot, but all I'm trying to do is provide information the best I can. I don't have all the answers. I never claim to. All I want to do is see us win. Wherever we are, I want to see us win because I think we have a right to win. We have a God-given nature to bloom, to blossom, to explore, and to flourish, function, and thrive. So having said that, I want to give a shout out to everybody again. Y'all have a joyous afternoon, evening, and take care, y'all. We out of this joint, man.
I know you player haters gon' hate, cause I'm at the finish line and I'm in the first place. I'm a winner.